Hello, welcome back to the Your Everyday Strength podcast. My name is Josh Sternberg, and if you're just joining us here for the very first time, welcome. Thank you very much for being here. If you are returning, you already know the fucking drill, but thank you very much again for coming back, listening in, tuning in. It has been a fucking hot minute since I have done 2 episodes in a row, i.e. where I'm actually going to release them the way I'm meant to, which is weekly. Fucking, you wouldn't read about it. But just like life update, we're so back. Not in an overly optimistic, fucking toxic positivity sort of way, but just in the way that, as I've always said, no matter what, life does get better and things do just take time to process them. But overall, we're on the up and up. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters. As long as you keep showing up, keep putting one foot in front of the other, and keep showing yourself how resilient you can be, how you can bounce back from any form of adversity, and what lessons you needed to learn along the way to get to the point with which you're in right now. That's all that matters. Now, today's episode, it kind of actually ties into last week's episode, which was the 12-week sort of reset. And I figured, actually, I'm not going to lie, I was supposed to have a guest locked in for this week. I do have a couple of guests that I'm trying to lock in. As I've mentioned in the past, locking guests in for podcasts is actually way harder than you would think. It's not a matter of just, hey, do you want to do a podcast? And then being like, yes. It's a matter of you're trying to get 2 grown adults. And generally the people that I'm trying to attract and get onto the podcast are, they're pretty fucking high caliber people. They're pretty high level. So trying to lock in somebody who's like quite busy, has their own business or businesses, life, etc., and trying to make that work with our schedules and everything like that is actually way harder than I first thought it would when I first started this podcast. Now, I've had some fucking phenomenal guests on here already, so I know that it's possible, and I'm going to continue to try and bring on some of the best guests that I can, and ideally just keep scaling this up to a point where I can get on some fucking world-class names. So yeah, not to say that any of the guests haven't been world-class, because I can guarantee you right now that if this is actually your first time listening to this podcast, go back and listen to like basically any of my guest episodes, because they're all fucking amazing. Like there's so much good value packed into every single one, no matter whether it's you're looking for training or nutrition advice, whether it's to do with, self-help and emotional regulation, or just wanting to listen to some really good stories. I've had some fucking fantastic guests. And if you do know anyone who might be interested in jumping on or having a chat, or there's someone that you could recommend, or there's someone you follow that you're like, damn, I want to hear more from this person, or fuck, these two actually align pretty well in terms of their messaging and things like that, please reach out, send me a message, let me know. I'll try and reach out to them. Or if you have a connection, fucking hook a brother up. It's who you know, not what you know. But moving on. Today's episode, as I said, is more or less related to the last episode that I did, which was around that 12-week sort of blueprint to a better you, to finding unshakable self-belief. Today's episode is called Build Standards, Not Goals. And the reason I've done this is because we know that a lot of people, they start the year with all these goals. And I did a couple of podcasts on this at the back end of last year. I did a podcast on this at the start of this year, where it was more or less talking about, instead of setting goals, I've set intentions as to how I want to show up as a person. Now, this kind of ties into that a little bit in relation to where setting goals, absolutely, that's no problem whatsoever. You can set, finance goals or training goals or nutrition goals or whatever the case might be. You set the goals for yourself. But to take that a step further, generally speaking, most people haven't achieved the goals that they have set because they haven't adopted standards that are actually going to be able to facilitate them. Now, what I mean by that is, I'm sure everybody's heard the old saying that, like, if nothing changes, nothing changes. And, for you to step into a new you need to become somebody you've never been before. And that is incredibly true. Because if you had the goals that you have set right now, and you were running with your same behaviors, same patterns, same standards that you're running at this current point in time, but you haven't achieved your goals, then those standards, those behaviors, those patterns are not enough. You need to essentially become the person who has already achieved that goal in order to achieve that goal. Now, that might be a little bit, it could be a little bit woo-woo, right? Like they say for you to attract your manifestations, you essentially need to become the person that already has that manifestation. So if you are somebody who, let's say, wants to be a millionaire, then you need to show up every single day as that person. What standards does a millionaire hold? What beliefs do they hold? What thought patterns? How do they show up in social interactions? How do they show up in their business, in their day-to-day? Like, what is it that they do? And how can you emulate that or turn it into your own structure about how to do it? So what we're going to be looking at to start off with is the biggest thing that I see, and this is why goals fail, is because people set these really nice goals, these big goals, they have these big aspirations, which is fucking fantastic. Dream big, reach for the stars. But they then don't change their behaviors. They just think that they're going to be able to achieve them doing the same shit that they've already done. And it's not the case, because people will set outcome goals. You might set a goal of lose 10 kilos, make 100K, run a marathon. Mint. But they then don't define the behavioral baseline that's actually required to achieve that goal. Because when motivation dips, the goal dies. When you start off with a goal, and I'm sure everybody's been in this basket, I know myself, I've been in this basket. You set a goal, you're super fucking motivated, you're ready to go, you're on. Something happens, oh, fuck, it's gone to the wayside, you're a little bit off it. What we're going to be doing is we want to set some behavioral baselines that are going to allow you to achieve that result, even on the days where motivation's dipping. Because a goal is something you want, but a standard is something you refuse to fall below. I'm going to say that again. A goal is something you want. A standard is something you refuse to fall below. Goals are events, standards are daily behaviors. You know, run a 10K, run a marathon. Cool. So you can set the date, you can set the goal. Okay, but what behaviors and what standards every single day are you going to uphold to actually give yourself the best chance at achieving that? That's where the real magic lies. That's where the little gritty comes into it, right? Because at the end of the day, what a standard actually is, it's the minimum level of behavior you accept from yourself. So that's not, it's not perfect performance and it's not PRs every single week. We're essentially looking at, looking towards the baseline that you refuse to violate. So when we're looking at this, right, let's use the example of lose 10 kilos. Now, if you have a goal of losing 10 kilos, you need to create some behaviors that are actually going to facilitate that. So one of the standards that you could set is you train 4 times per week. Your goal is lose 10 kilos. Your standard is going to be you train 4 times per week, no matter what. If you have a goal to grow your business, it's, okay, I work on revenue generating tasks daily. It's not just enough to say, oh, I'm going to grow my business. I want to make 100K. So I'm sure so do a lot of people. How are you going to do it? You need to set some sort of standard, some sort of ingrained belief that that's actually going to happen. Or, even from a relationship standpoint, and it's not lost on me the irony of me talking about relationships. Better relationships, communicate directly and don't avoid hard conversations. You might observe a pattern in your previous relationships where you shut down, are unable to talk, go silent, all the rest of it. And then that might actually cause greater stress within your relationship. Whereas if you're able to communicate directly and not avoid hard conversations, it can save you and potentially your partner a lot of hassle, a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of energy to ensure that you guys are both actually on the same page. Now, standards just remove negotiation, because once it's a standard, once it's a baseline that you do not sway from, then that is just the norm. And this is where it comes into the part about you need to become somebody that you may not necessarily be right now, but you are becoming somebody that is doing the things that you want to do. So if you want to avoid, having arguments constantly, well, the best way to avoid that is to communicate directly in the moment and not avoid hard conversations when they're needed, because generally arguments and things like that can stem from resentment or just micro resentments where you just kind of let things go. And then all of a sudden that little thing that sort of like triggered something 5 weeks ago is now this huge fucking cascade of just like everything at once, rather than just addressing it for what it was back then and continuing to move forward. So yeah, that's just a couple of examples about what an actual standard is, because that is what we want. We want better standards. There's a 5 standard framework that I would probably look to utilize. Now, this can also stem off the back of, as I mentioned last week in the 12-week sort of guide, is we're focusing on 3 core pillars. So the ones that I selected back then were self, were business, and were training. This is very similar in that regards, because it's taking the essence of what that is and essentially building it out into a little bit more of a framework, because once we actually have a framework, we can work with it. Now, the 5 standard frameworks that I would look at across the board that make up a person, roughly, give or take, is you've got physical standards, you've got business/work standards, you have self-talk standards, relationship standards, and financial standards. With that, we're kind of looking at each standard as how you're going to show up. What are the minimum baseline things that you're going to be doing? Now, it might seem like a lot at first, but when you actually think about it, you're probably already doing these things every single day anyway. But because there's no structure or real identification around any of them, you may not necessarily be seeing, where there's cracks or where there's like a little bit of a leak that you could probably plug up pretty quickly and make some massive changes very, very fast. So if we're going to be looking at physical standards, for example, we could have our baseline as minimum training frequency, step count baseline, protein target, minimum sleep per night. And one of the biggest things that we're going to be looking at from that perspective is we're not going to be looking to chase aesthetics first, because aesthetics are going to come as a byproduct of our non-negotiable behaviors. If your goal is to lose 10 kilos and currently you're only training once a week, you sometimes track, your steps are a little bit up and down. Cool. Lowest hanging fruit. We're going to be training 3 to 4 times a week. Set that standard. And at the end of the day, that's 3 to 4 hours for most people out of an entire week. It's actually not that fucking hard. If you can't find 3 to 4 hours for yourself in 7 days, it is not a priority. That's one caveat. Step count baseline, minimum steps per day. Make sure you hit your steps. Nowadays, there's so many available modalities that are around that are pretty much make it impossible to not hit your steps. Now, unless there's some sort of like catastrophic event or something massively pops up, you should be able to hit a pretty easy step count baseline. Most people, even office workers, should be able to hit 8,000 steps a day. You just should. It's not that difficult. It's actually pretty easy. It might take a little bit of prior planning or a little bit of proactiveness, but you can get it done. And I can promise you, you'll feel much better for it. Having a protein target. Set a protein target. 2 grams per kilo of body weight, minimum. The real recommendation is 1.7 to 2.2. Most of the guys I work with, I do 2 to 2.5. Seen pretty good results with it. So somewhere around there, but like as just a general rule of thumb, 2 grams per kilo of body weight. So if you're 60 kilos, 120 grams a day. If you're 70 kilos, 140 grams a day. Easy. Hit that every single day. Track it. Minimum sleep per night. Again, shouldn't be too hard of a task. Sleep is the number 1 most anabolic thing for just about everything in our life, from training, nutrition, work, all of it. It's going to help every single thing. Set the non-negotiable behaviors. That's what your baseline is. That's where you need to be. And don't just set what you're already doing, because again, remember that if you're already doing these things, you would have achieved the goals that you've got set. Push yourself a little bit. If you're doing, 8,000 steps a day, push it to 10,000. If you're doing 10, try go to 12 or 11 or whatever the case might be. If you're doing 3, double it. Go to 6. Please move more. I can promise you, you're going to feel a fuck ton better for it. And your body's going to feel better too, which is actually the best thing about it. Now, work/business standards. We could look at something along the lines of like, if you're a business owner or you work for yourself or you're a coach or something like that, like 1 deep work block daily. And I'm talking deep. I'm talking phone on do not disturb. You are locked the fuck in. There is so many YouTube videos that are called like deep work block or something like that, where you can just follow with them. if you struggle to stay locked in for whatever reason, I use them sometimes from time to time as well because they help. It's just like random, it's frequency sounds, or it's like some sort of sound with just like you're following along with this person and you can work in a deep work block with them. And it actually makes it really fucking easy. Another sort of example that you could utilize is no scrolling before revenue tasks. So when you first wake up of a morning, don't reach for your phone first thing. Get up, get your day started, jump on your computer, do one revenue generating task to begin with. Now, whether that could be a piece of content, whether that could be follow-up messages, whether that could be outreach or anything along those lines, do one of those before you start scrolling on Instagram. That's actually, for me, I could definitely be doing better at that. I was getting really, really good at waking up and not touching my phone at all until I'd get back from my walk. But that's definitely, somewhere for me that I could probably increase my ability and my output. Following up leads within 24 hours. If you're a coach, if you're an online coach or even just a face-to-face PT, and you are not getting back to leads within 24 hours, you hate business. You must hate making money. Because I can promise you right now that even when I have been the busiest I've ever fucking been in my life, I've been able to follow up with leads all the time. It's not hard. It takes 10 seconds. Send a fucking voice note. You want to be a bit more personable? Send a voice note. Don't send a written message. Hey, mate, saw your fucking inquiry come in. Really looking forward to having a chat with you. Thanks heaps. If there's anything in the meantime that you need, just reach out, send me a message. Done. 20 seconds of your life, and you have made such a massive impact before you've even gotten on a call or before you've even discussed anything with that person. Another standard is, publish content consistently. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of these are more tailored towards businesses, coaches, etc. Within most people's jobs, they kind of don't really have much leverage with what they're doing. They kind of just have to do the framework that's set for them on their day. Like they might have the way in which they structure their day. But for people who do want to own businesses or do want to work for themselves or anything like that, like setting these non-negotiables actually does make a genuine difference. Now, I'm somebody who has my entire week mapped out on my computer, and something that has actually made a huge difference lately, and this is just like a little insight, is I always seem to have these like offset tasks, and they're more or less like, they're somewhat important, but they're not like, they're not world changing. They're not these things that are going to absolutely like change the world for me on my actual week. And I'd always want to do them, but it would kind of get to the point where I'd like finish all my tasks for the day. I'd finish my work and I'd just be like, oh, fuck, I could do that one, or I could do this one, or I could do this. And what I've actually started to do, and this is something I created, I won't lie, ChatGPT helped me create it, but it's called a tier 2 time. Now, tier 2 is essentially the things that are just these little like additions to your business. So it could be something as simple as, for me at the moment, it's learning more about content creation and spending time actively working on some other projects. These were things that I'd wanted to do, but I just kept sort of not necessarily finding excuses to not do them, but I was just kind of a bit lost because there were so many of them. Now I've allotted specific time within the course of my week for what is these tier 2 tasks. And funnily enough, I've made more progress on these tier 2 tasks in the last 2 weeks than I have in the last 6 months, because now there's an allotted time for them. Now there's actually somewhere that I can sit down and be like, cool, this is actually what I'm doing in this moment. Bang, done. Locked it in, fucking smack it out, get it done, keep it moving. Now, one of the, probably more underrated standards or something that you can set for yourself is self-talk. Self-talk is so fucking critical. I speak about it all the time, and like, you need to give yourself the same grace, love, and compassion that you would give to another person. You need to talk to yourself the way you would talk to your best friend, because I could promise you right now, and I am so guilty of this, we would never talk to the people around us sometimes the way we talk to ourselves. We just wouldn't. No, we don't want to be using self-deprecating language. Stop it. Cut it out. Everything we talk has an effect on us subconsciously. Whether you want to believe it or not, whether you think Whether you fucking lean into the woo-woo shit or not, everything we say externally, internally, all has an effect on our subconscious. If we're constantly telling ourselves we're dumb, we're stupid, we're lazy, we're broke, we're this, we're that, then we're going to be those things. But if we start to learn to tell ourselves, I am somebody who achieves my goals, I am somebody who works hard, I am somebody who can do this hard task, can do this thing, that's where the change comes from. So cut out the fucking self-deprecating language. No catastrophic thinking, none. Stop it. Stop thinking worst case scenario, because 9 times out of 10, it's never gonna happen. If you can think about the worst case scenario, think about the best case scenario. And this is something I've really been trying to shift my mindset around lately, is if I can overthink about bad things, then fucking sure as all hell I can overthink about good things too. Instead of thinking, oh, well, what if this goes wrong? Man, what are all the possibilities if this goes right? What are all the things that can come as a byproduct of this thing going right? Think about that. Spend more time with that. And I can promise you right now that your mindset and your mentality around it will shift exponentially. As humans, we just have this weird ingrained negative self-talk and catastrophic thinking. We're always just looking for the worst thing that could happen, because then if we predict it, it's like, well, we predicted that was going to happen. Cool. Now predict the good things. Now predict what are the good things that are going to happen as a result. And another example, no emotional spirals without action. You're allowed to be emotional. You're allowed to get upset about things. You're allowed to be hurt by things. What you're not allowed to do is allow that to spiral and keep you in a pit of despair. Again, a lot of these things, like when I talk about this stuff, it's not because I'm coming from a place of like, I'm better than everyone, so this is why I'm setting. I'm coming from a place of, this is shit that I am working on. Like, no emotional spirals without action. My biggest goal, one of my biggest like self goals in this year is going to be less time spent spiraling, because let's be realistic. Emotions are going to happen. They're going to exist. Stress, anxiety, all of it. It's going to exist. But no emotional spiraling that drags on. Allow yourself to feel it. Identify maybe the core attribute as to where it's stemming from or what's causing it, and put a plan in place to fix it in the future. Create some form of actionable steps that you can create in the future to help yourself to not spiral, whether that could be journaling, or whether it's breath work, or whether it's talking to a friend, or you might look at a problem or try and sit back and, instead of engaging with something that's going on in your head, try and observe yourself. That sounds a little bit weird, but instead of engaging with this talk that goes on inside your head, observe it instead. So take a step back and realize that you don't have to engage with every thought that runs through your head. And as soon as you start to do that, and as soon as you start to get a little bit better at just taking a step back and being like, okay, well, I'm having this weird ass conversation in my brain about something that may not ever happen. Well, I'm not actually having that conversation. My brain is. Cool. Take a step back, observe it. And I can promise you right now, you will find a hell of a lot more peace within those situations. It actually blows my fucking mind how much of a difference it makes, because that's where identity shifts happen. This is when you start to get on top of self-talk and you drop the self-deprecating language and you have no catastrophic thinking and there's no emotional spirals without action. All of a sudden, when things don't necessarily go right, you almost look at it as like, fuck yeah, this is something I get to work on, or this is something I get to investigate, or this is something I get to actually look at. It becomes a positive instead of a negative. It's, well, if this theme keeps coming up across relationships, business, life, whatever the case might be, well, what is actually the root cause of it? Where is that stemming from? And once you can dive a little bit deeper, if you work with a health professional, i.e. psychologist, psychiatrist, someone like that, they can definitely help you to find the underlying root cause of a lot of these things. I know myself at the moment, I am actually talking to my psych weekly as it stands at this point in time, because I've said like, fuck, you know what? I want to get better, feel better, continue to be better for the future, and ensure that when, crisis hits in the future, because no doubt it probably might, then I'm better equipped than ever before to actually deal with that. And I can tell you right now that yes, you know what, it's an investment. It costs money to go to the psychologist. I understand that it's not the cheapest thing in the world, but for me, the value that I get out of it to show up better as a person, as a business owner, as a friend, as a family member, all the rest of it, it just far outweighs anything else. And it's not going to be weekly forever. But right now, I've identified, hey, this is probably where I need more help. So I'm going to go and pay somebody that will help me with that. You can find your thing. You know, people find coaches like myself to help them with their training and nutrition. I'm just doing that, but with a psychologist. And we've got relationship standards. So as I mentioned before, right, like direct communication, no ghosting, no silent resentment, and no avoidance. Don't avoid the hard conversations. If you're with somebody and you can't have a hard conversation because of their reaction or something like that, not a relationship coach, but that might be something to address or look at a little bit deeper. If you know, something happens and your first reaction is to go ghost and build resentment, resentment will come out eventually. I can promise you that right now. All these little micro resentments. You might think about something that's like so small and meaningless in the moment, but then when that builds on top and then builds on top and then builds on top, we already know that momentum can be generated from the smallest of actions. That's good and bad, unfortunately. And once you start to avoid these things and you start to have all these like maybe not so positive ways of dealing with it, that's where things start to cascade. And unfortunately, then, you know, we see the rise of relationship breakdowns and fucking divorces and all the rest of it. Again, I'm not a fucking relationship coach. I'm definitely not giving relationship advice out, but these are just things that can help in the future for people. Financial standards. Obviously, you need to track your spending. Set a fucking budget. If you have a goal to save X amount of money, you need to actually know how much money you're making at this point in time. And you also need to know, you know, where your bills are going. Like, okay, well, if I'm making, let's just say $1,000, I'm making $1,000 a week, 300 goes to rent, 200 goes to food, there's 500. Now, car repayment, if you have that or whatever, start allotting yourself these spendings, these budgets, set yourself a budget and stick to it, track it. See where you spend your money, see where you might overspend your money. Once you actually start to have a look at it, you'll be like, oh shit, I remember back in the day, a very long time ago now, when I was on really high calories, I would spend upwards of like nearly $500 a week on food because I was spending about $250 to $300 on food shopping. And then I would probably spend another $100 to $200 on eating out on top of that. And that wasn't even like me purposely doing it. It was just quite literally me not paying any attention to what I was doing. And I would just kind of be like, oh yeah, cool. Like lunch is $20 or $25, like whatever. That's only $25, but wouldn't take into, you know, consideration, oh, but I had dinner out last night. Or I know I got like lunch yesterday and that was $25. Well, now that $25 is actually $50. And all of a sudden that starts to add up. So once I started to do that, I was like, oh, fuck. And I realized that I can actually eat for way less. And now I budget $250 a week for food. My normal food bill, dependent upon the week, is about $180 to $220. Some weeks are a little bit more when you have to stock up on the essentials and stuff. But for the most part, I can eat fairly cheap over the course of a week. And I'm sure that if I really wanted to rein that in even further, I could, but I'm quite content with where that's at the moment. But tracking your spending weekly is a massive thing. Understanding where your money is going and what it is doing for you. Investing in growth quarterly. Now, you can look at growth in so many different ways. Investing in growth could be, like myself at the moment, investing in my psychologist, like, you know, clients of mine paying me as their coach. That's investing in growth. You might have a business coach if you're a business owner. You might look at all these other aspects, or you might want to go to a talk or do a course or something like that. Invest in growth. If you're not growing, you're going to stay the same. Even if it's just like a little one-day seminar where you can go and learn something new or take away a couple of different actionable steps or look at someone else's perspective on things, because 9 times out of 10, if you've done a bunch of courses or you've done some education and stuff, there's nothing too groundbreaking out there. what I found, and I've spent, well in the six figures on personal development, coaching, courses, education, all of it. And what I found after for probably the first like 12 to 24 months was 1 to 2 years. I don't know why the fuck I said it that way. That there was nothing really groundbreaking in any of the things that I was learning or doing, but it was just more or less about perspective and looking at the way in which other people interpret information and data and how they put it together and the frameworks they create. And I can tell you right now that that's helped me massively from a coaching perspective, because I've had so many different lenses to look at things through that it just assists in my ability to show up better as a coach. Save a minimum percent automatically. So for me, I've got a certain percentage that straight away I put money into tax, I put money into savings, and I put money into a free spend account. All of my money is divided into the accounts that it needs to go to automatically. I don't even have to think about it. I just open up my bank, bang, 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 put it all together. I think there's banking apps out there now that will actually do that for you. I'm not too sure about where they are or what banks they are, but for me, I just do it every single week. So once I get paid on a Friday, I get my little payout from Nui. As soon as I get that payment, the first thing I do, log in, split all my accounts up, done. Don't have to think about it. Don't have to double check my account. Don't ever have to be like, oh, where's this money coming from? Am I going to be able to afford that? It's like, no, damn, I know I can afford that. I know this, I know that. Here's where this is, here's where that is, etc. And it's not going to be perfect every time. That, there's sometimes these bills that pop up out of nowhere, or things that happen that you don't necessarily account for. But having accounts like rainy day funds and all the rest of it definitely helps as well. But you can't have those things if you're not tracking. You can't have those things if you're not actually looking at where your money's coming from and where it's going to. Once you start to get on top of that and you start to control that, I can promise you that it's going to make a massive difference for you. Section 4, raising standards without becoming obsessive. I think that this is really, really important, because a lot of people will try and raise their standards and then they almost become a little bit neurotic about it. They become like, now I have these standards, I can't away from it, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, just because you raise your standards, it doesn't mean you have to become rigid. It just means that there's intentional effort. There's a non-negotiable baseline and emotional regulation when you slip, and basically keeping on top of the things that you need to keep on top of. It's understanding that, and I mentioned this last week in the podcast, was never lose 2 days in a row. Well, introduce something like a never miss twice rule, which essentially is that you might miss an activity or miss something on one day, and that's okay. It happens. It fucking happens. We get it. But don't miss twice. Evaluate at the end of the day, hey, this is why I missed out on this. I fucking slept in. I didn't get my steps in the morning, and I missed out on getting them in the afternoon because it was raining. I could have got them in the morning, but because I didn't, I missed out. Cool. Don't allow it to happen the next morning. Set the alarm, get up. Don't miss 2 days in a row. Once you miss 2 days in a row, that starts to become a habit. And they say it takes 21 days to make or break a habit. But what people don't realize is it takes as little as 2 days to actually start to make or break a habit, because 1 day is cool, whatever. 2 days, it's like, okay, now I'm starting to generate momentum in the other direction. And it's very easy to start to look at that and be like, well, what's the point? I lost Monday, I already lost Tuesday, it's now Wednesday, I may as well just start again Monday. And then all of a sudden you've written off the rest of the week and you just fucking fall behind the 8 ball and you just start to lose a grip on where you've wanted to go. So don't become neurotic about it. Grace, compassion, love, understand that yes, sometimes you will miss, but don't make it 2 days in a row and you will be fine. Now, if we're going to be looking at actually installing these standards, we have to have some form of practical system, right? We're going to be looking at pick 3 categories. So to start off with, yes, we have the 5 standard framework and there's 5 key attributes within that. But if you're somebody who at the moment isn't in a relationship, you might want to be one day. But if you're not in a relationship, then maybe the relationship one isn't super practical for you. But if you're if you're somebody who already is doing physical standards and you're adhering to your baseline of your physical standards and you are achieving the goals that you've set out to achieve, maybe that one may be not as applicable to you, but it could be in the future. So pick 3 categories, and then for each of those categories, the next thing you're going to do is create 3 baseline behaviors. I've already given you a prime amount of examples as to each baseline behavior that you can actually set. The next thing that you need to do is make them measurable. The training one is super easy. The nutrition one is super easy. They're really easy to measure. The relationship one might be a little bit harder because it's like, how do you actually check to see if you are adhering to it? But just try and make them measurable. Like maybe count how many days you spiral for if something goes wrong and then try and reduce that or something like that. Like there's so many ways you could probably look at this. Dive a little bit deeper, look a little bit further than just surface level of like, well, I don't want to do X. Cool. How are you going to track that you're not doing that? See what I mean? Finances, easy to track. Did you track your money this week? Yes, no. Perfect. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to audit weekly without emotion. Every single Sunday, I sit down and I go through my weekly business tracker. I go through my weekly self-audit. I have my list of things that I've needed to set. Did I achieve these? Yes, no. It's easy as that. There's no, yeah, no, but, and it's like yes or no. Did I achieve them? Did I not achieve them? Remove the emotion. As soon as you start to get emotional about this shit, you're going to throw it away. Remove emotion, audit yourself weekly, watch yourself grow more than you'll ever believe possible. And then adjust up every 12 weeks. So once you reach the new baseline, 12 weeks, you're ingrained, you're good to go, adjust it up. If you've had the baseline of 8,000 steps a day, cool, go to 10. Keep pushing the limit. Find your limit. Find where you can really push yourself to, and I can promise you, you're a lot more capable than you think you are. You just have to actually put in a little bit of effort and try really fucking hard every single day. Now, from there, that's like a pretty fucking stock standard practical way to actually implement these tasks. Installing the standards should be something that you want to do. It should be something you're excited about doing. Showing up as the person that you want to be in the future should excite you, because if it doesn't, then you don't want what you've set. If you don't want to show up as this person who does achieve these things and does live this life, that's okay. But don't set yourself the goals of that. Set yourself the goals of the person you actually want to be in the future. Show up as that person every single day. Pick your 3 categories. Pick your 3 baseline behaviors. Make them measurable, audit weekly, continue to move forward. Simple as that. If you follow that framework, you will succeed across anything you want to do in your life. Because at the end of the day, you don't rise to your goals, you actually fall to your standards. And that's where a lot of people get lost. They set all these big goals and then they have these standards that are down here still. They're not working towards these. They're sticking with this. And then they're like, well, why the fuck am I never achieving my goals? Why does that seem so far away? Pick your standards up. Because if you don't like your life right now, you need to look at what you've been tolerating, because at the end of the day, standards create identity and identity creates outcome. Bang. There you go. That should be a pretty practical framework. There's one final question that I will leave you with once you finish listening to this podcast. And this is something that you can go away straight away and do. What have you been allowing that you would not accept from someone you admire? So what have you been doing yourself that you would not accept from someone you admire? Have a think. Have a really good think about that. And then bang, audit yourself. Start to make the change today to show up as the person you want to be tomorrow. That's another episode done. Thank you very much for listening. If you took value from this, as always, like, share, comment, fucking post it on your story, send it to a friend, send me a message, like whatever. Just talk to me about it. Comment, like, whatever. I'm not too fussed. But hopefully you've taken some value from this today. I mentioned at the start, but go back and listen to a bunch of my old guest episodes because there's so much fucking value in a lot of the past episodes as well. If you have any future questions, topics, guests, please send them through. Beyond that, I hope you all have a fantastic day and an even better week. Please just remember to be fucking show up as the person you want to be. That's all I can say. Set a goal, set a standard, show up. Show up for yourself and you'll show up better for others. Have a great day and I'll speak to you on the next one.